My mother called me an embarrassment because I worked in a factory. She sent a text in the family group chat saying Mother's Day dinner was for successful kids only. She did not include my name. My siblings reacted with laughing emojis. So I disappeared. I vanished into the grind. 3 years later, I returned not as the worker she was ashamed of, but as the owner of the company she needed to save her from bankruptcy. Before I reveal how I hired my own mother as an entry-level packer, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you know that success is the best revenge. My name is Nia, and I am sitting in a silence that costs $3 million. The air conditioning in my penthouse hums at a frequency you can barely hear. The floor-to-ceiling windows frame the glittering Atlanta skyline like a living painting. I take a sip of vintage red wine and hold the crystal glass up to the light. I want you to look at my hands, really look at them. Tonight they are soft. My nails are manicured to perfection, painted a shade of pale rose that screams old money. My skin is moisturized with lotions that cost more than my weekly grocery budget used to be. There is a diamond ring on my right hand that catches the light. It is the hand of a woman who signs contracts, not one who fixes conveyor belts. But if you look closely, you can still see the phantom outlines of the grease. 5 years ago, these hands were permanently stained black. No matter how hard I scrubbed with heavy-duty pumice soap, the oil from the factory machines never fully came out. It settled into the creases of my knuckles and under my fingernails like a tattoo of my struggle. To me, it looked like survival. To my mother, Joyce, it looked like failure. I can still see the look of absolute disgust on her face from that afternoon in her living room. I had come over to give her money because she was behind on her mortgage again. I reached out to touch her shoulder to comfort her. She flinched. She actually jumped back as if I were holding a knife. She brushed the spot on her shoulder where my hand had hovered and said, "Nia, do not touch me with those filthy things. You look like a common laborer." She looked at her cream-colored velvet sofa and then back at me with pure panic. She said, "Do not sit down. You will ruin the fabric. Go wash yourself. You are making the whole room smell like a garage." That was the moment I realized my mother would rather starve in a pristine house than accept help from a daughter with dirty hands. She valued the appearance of status over the reality of love. She told me my job was beneath the family dignity. She said I had settled for a life of grunt work. It is ironic, really. Because tonight, as I look out at the city lights, my mother is currently wishing she had those dirty hands. She wanted to preserve her dignity, so I let her keep it. And now my manicured hands are the only thing standing between her and a homeless shelter. But she did not know that back then. Back then, I was just the disappointment, the black sheep. And it all started with a notification on my phone that shattered the last bit of hope I had for us. I walk across the room to the marble fireplace where the family history is supposed to be displayed. There are 4 silver frames here. They are all turned face down against the cold stone. I keep them that way for a reason. If you turn them over, you would see smiling faces that look like the cover of a magazine. But I know the rot that lies beneath those perfect smiles. Let me introduce you to the players in this game who thought they could break me. First, there is Tasha, my older sister. If you looked at her social media feed, you would think she is the queen of Atlanta. Every photo is filtered to perfection, showing off brunch dates and luxury shopping sprees. She calls herself a lifestyle curator. But I know the truth behind the filters. I know that the designer bags she flaunts are rented by the hour. I know that she has 7 credit cards maxed out to the limit, hidden in a shoebox in her closet, because she is terrified her husband will find out she is drowning. She spent her entire 20s mocking me for wearing steel-toed boots and safety goggles. She called me the family embarrassment because I worked with my hands. But while she was building a mountain of debt to impress strangers on the internet, I was building equity. She is a statue made of sugar, beautiful to look at, but one drop of rain, and she dissolves. Then there is Hunter, my brother-in-law. He is the man Tasha married to secure her status. He comes from one of those old New England families that lost their money 2 generations ago, but kept the attitude. He walks around our community with his nose in the air, treating everyone like his personal staff. He calls himself a tech entrepreneur. He uses buzzwords like synergy and disruption to sound important. But the reality is that his startup has not made a single dollar in 6 years. He has been quietly draining my mother's retirement accounts to fund an office he does not need for a business that does not exist. He looked at me with such disdain whenever I came home in my uniform. He treated me like the help in my own childhood home, not realizing that the help had more money in the bank than he ever would. And finally, there is the matriarch, Joyce. I stopped calling her mom a long time ago. A mother offers unconditional love. Joyce only offers conditional approval. To her, children are not people, they are accessories. If you make her look good at the country club, she loves you. If you make her look bad, you are invisible. She spent my entire life trying to polish me into a trophy she could display. When I chose engineering and factory work over a society marriage, she took it as a personal insult. She believed that my blue-collar job was a stain on her reputation that needed to be scrubbed away. They all sat on their high horses, judging me for sweating for a living, while their entire house of cards was built on debt and delusion. They thought they were untouchable. But every kingdom has to fall eventually. And for my family, the collapse began on a Sunday afternoon in May. Let me tell you about the dinner that changed everything. Let us rewind 5 years to the night that started the countdown to their destruction. The noise inside the Apex packaging facility was deafening. It was a constant rhythmic thrum of conveyor belts and hydraulic presses that vibrated deep in your chest until your own heartbeat matched the mechanical tempo. I was working the graveyard shift covering for a coworker who had called in sick. My uniform was heavy with sweat sticking to my back like a second skin. I had been on my feet for 9 hours stacking crates of automotive parts that weighed 40 pounds each. The air smelled of heated rubber and industrial lubricant, a scent that clung to my hair no matter how many times I washed it. Somewhere in the pocket of my cargo pants, my phone buzzed against my leg. It was a persistent vibration that cut through the industrial chaos. I wiped my greasy hands on a rag and pulled it out. The bright screen was blinding in the dim warehouse light. It was a notification from the Washington's group chat. My heart actually skipped a beat when I saw the first message from Joyce. Mother's Day brunch at the Ivy Sunday at 11 a.m. I felt a rush of adrenaline that had nothing to do with the heavy lifting. The Ivy was the most exclusive spot in Buckhead, known for its impossible reservation list and its clientele of senators and socialites. Being invited meant I was being seen. For a split second, I allowed myself to fantasize. I imagined sitting at a table with white linen, laughing with my sister, eating food I did not have to cook myself. I started typing immediately. I was already doing the mental math of how much overtime I would need to work to buy a decent dress and maybe get my hair done so I would fit in. My thumbs hovered over the screen, ready to type the words "I will be there." But before I could hit send, a second bubble popped up on the screen. It was a follow-up message from my mother, and it hit me harder than any physical blow. "This is a celebration of our family excellence. Successful children only, please." The cursor on my screen blinked, mocking me. Then came the third message, the one that knocked the wind out of me. "Nia, honey, you do not need to come. We will be taking photos for the society page, and I simply do not have the energy to explain your line of work to my friends. We will bring you a doggy bag." I froze. The noise of the factory seemed to fade into a dull roar as I read those words over and over. Successful children only. I stared at the phone as the notifications continued to roll in. Tasha reacted to my mother's text with a laughing face emoji. Hunter replied with, "Good call, Joyce keeps the aesthetic clean." They were discussing my exclusion as if I were a stain on the tablecloth, not a human being. They were talking about me as if I wasn't even in the chat, as if I didn't have feelings that could be bruised. I stood there in the middle of the factory floor, surrounded by robots and steel, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. I slowly backspaced the reply I had started typing. I put the phone back in my pocket and lifted the next heavy crate. The weight felt different this time. It wasn't just physical. It was the crushing weight of knowing that to the people who were supposed to love me, I was nothing more than a dirty secret they wanted to hide. The sun was just beginning to rise over the industrial park as I punched my time card. My body screamed for sleep. My lower back throbbed and my feet felt like they were encased in cement blocks. Logic dictated that I should go home, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed. But the wounded child inside me took the wheel. Instead of driving to my small apartment, I drove toward Buckhead. I wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to show my mother that even with a factory job, I could afford the kind of luxury she worshipped. I parked my rusted sedan as far away from the entrance of the upscale shopping district as possible, so no one would see it. I walked past windows displaying jewelry that cost more than my car. I felt like an alien. Passers-by in their jogging suits and yoga gear gave me a wide berth. I was still wearing my work boots and a flannel shirt over my uniform. I kept my head down and headed straight for the Coach store. I knew my mother loved their classic designs. I told myself that if I brought her something beautiful, something expensive, she would have to acknowledge me. She would have to smile. That smile was a drug I had been chasing my entire life, and I was willing to bankrupt myself to get one hit of it. I entered the store and the air conditioning hit my sweaty skin like a shock. The sales associate was a young woman with perfect makeup. She looked up from her phone, saw my appearance, and immediately looked back down. She did not greet me. She did not ask if I needed help. She assumed I was lost or there to clean something. I walked to the display case and picked up a beige leather tote. It was elegant and understated, exactly my mother's style. I checked the price tag, $350. It was on clearance, but it was still 2 weeks of groceries for me. I did not care. I marched to the counter and placed the bag down. The girl looked at the bag and then at me with undisguised skepticism. "Are you buying this?" she asked, her tone implying that I probably could not afford it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. It was my savings stash. I counted out the money in 20s, 10s, and 5s. The bills were crumpled, and some had faint smudges of grease on the corners from my hands. I watched her pick them up with 2 fingers as if they were contaminated. She punched the numbers into the register with a sigh. As I walked out with that glossy paper bag, I felt a surge of foolish hope. I convinced myself that this was the bridge that would fix everything. I would not stay for dinner, I told myself. I would just drop off the gift. I would walk in, hand her this beautiful, expensive thing, and say Happy Mother's Day. She would see that I was thoughtful. She would see that I had money. She would invite me to sit down. She would tell Tasha to make room. I played this fantasy over and over in my head, ignoring the knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I was buying a ticket to my own humiliation, and I was paying for it in cash. The Ivy was not just a restaurant. It was a fortress of exclusivity built to keep people like me out. As I turned my 2004 Honda Civic into the circular driveway, the difference in status was physically painful. The engine of my car sputtered and wheezed, a sharp contrast to the purring engines of the Bentleys and Mercedes surrounding me. My car had a dent on the passenger side door from a forklift accident at the warehouse, and the paint was peeling on the hood like sunburned skin. I could feel the eyes of the patrons on the patio burning into me. They looked up from their mimosas and lobster tails with expressions of mild amusement, as if my poverty was a piece of performance art. I pulled up to the valet stand. The attendant was a young man with slicked back hair and a red vest that looked more expensive than my entire outfit. He was opening the door for a woman stepping out of a G-Wagon, smiling charmingly as she handed him a $100 tip. When he turned and saw my Honda, his smile vanished instantly. He did not step forward to open my door. He stood firmly in place, his arms crossed over his chest like a bouncer at a club. I rolled down my window, the manual crank squeaking in the silence. I am here for the Washington party, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The valet looked at my car and then looked around as if checking to see if anyone important was watching this interaction. We are at capacity for the valet lot, miss, he said flatly. His eyes landed on the oil stain on my shirt sleeve that I had tried to hide with a cardigan. Deliveries are around the back anyway. The insult hit me like a slap. He thought I was there to deliver food, not eat it. I swallowed the lump of anger in my throat. I am a guest, I said, my voice tighter this time. But he was already waving me away, signaling for the Tesla behind me to pull forward. You will have to find street parking. Please move. You are blocking the flow. I had no choice but to drive away. I found a spot 3 blocks down near a construction site. The walk back to the restaurant was a march of humiliation. My heels, which I had bought at a thrift store, clicked unevenly on the pavement. I was sweating by the time I reached the entrance again, clutching the paper bag with the Coach purse like a shield. And there it was. Parked right in the front spot under the warm glow of the gas lamps was Hunter's silver Porsche. The vanity license plate read TCH Mogul. It was gleaming, spotless, and arrogant. I stared at that car, knowing the truth that the valet did not. That Porsche was leased. Hunter was 3 months behind on the payments. The gas in the tank was probably paid for by my mother's credit card. But because it looked the part, it got the VIP treatment. My Honda was fully paid for with honest, hard-earned money, but it was banished to the shadows. It was a perfect metaphor for my family. Appearance was God, and reality was a sin. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and prepared to walk into the lion's den, knowing that the car outside was just the beginning of the lies I was about to face. I stood on the sidewalk, separated from my family by a single pane of reinforced glass. It might as well have been a prison wall. Inside the restaurant looked like a golden aquarium of wealth and happiness. The lighting was warm and amber, designed to make everyone look beautiful and rich. I could see them clearly. They were seated at the best table in the house right by the window. My mother Joyce was holding court. She was laughing at something Hunter had said, her head thrown back in a display of joy that I had not seen directed at me in years. She looked radiant. She was wearing a pearl necklace that I knew was fake, but from this distance it looked like royalty. For a moment, I just watched them. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I saw Tasha reach over and adjust my mother's collar, playing the role of the doting daughter perfectly. Hunter was pouring champagne from a bottle that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. They looked like a tableau of the perfect American family, a family that had successfully amputated the infected limb. Me. I took a breath that rattled in my chest. I told myself that if I could just get their attention, if I could just wave and show them the gift, they would soften. I stepped closer to the glass. My reflection ghosted over them, a faint, transparent image of a girl in a cheap dress hovering over their feast. I raised my hand. I knocked. It was a soft sound. Tap, tap, tap. Tasha was the first to hear it. She frowned and turned her head, looking for the source of the noise. When her eyes locked onto mine, her expression did not soften. It sharpened. She looked annoyed, as if a fly had landed on her meal. She immediately nudged my mother and pointed a manicured finger at the window. My mother turned. The smile was still on her face, but the moment she saw me standing there clutching that Coach bag, the smile slid off her face like oil. It was replaced instantly by a look of sheer panic. She did not wave. She did not mouth the words, "Come inside." She looked around the restaurant, frantically checking to see if anyone else had noticed the girl in the parking lot clothes standing at the window. Then she did something that broke my heart more than any words could have. She reached out her hand. But instead of beckoning me, she grabbed the thick, heavy velvet curtain hanging beside the table. With one swift, violent motion, she yanked it shut. The golden light was gone. The view of my family was gone. I was left staring at the dark fabric of the curtain. She had literally closed the blinds on her own daughter. She had erased me from the view so she could enjoy her appetizers without being reminded of my existence. I stood there on the concrete staring at that closed curtain, realizing that to her, I was not a person. I was a stain on the landscape that needed to be covered up. The message was loud and clear. You do not exist in our world. And that silence behind the curtain hurt more than if she had come out and slapped me across the face. I pushed through the heavy mahogany doors and stepped into the foyer of the restaurant. The transition was jarring. Outside was the cold reality of the street, but inside was a cocoon of warmth scented with fresh lilies and expensive cologne. The lobby was empty except for the hostess stand, but before I could even formulate what I was going to say, the double doors to the dining room swung open. My family walked out. They moved in a formation that reminded me of a royal procession. My mother was in the center looking satisfied and full-flanked by Tasha and Hunter. They were laughing at some private joke, their faces flushed with wine and self-importance. I froze, clutching the paper bag against my chest like a shield. I wanted to turn around and run, but my feet felt heavy as lead. Hunter was the first to notice something was wrong. He stopped mid-stride and his laughter died instantly. He wrinkled his nose, sniffing the air with an exaggerated expression of disgust. He looked around the lobby as if searching for a gas leak. Then his eyes landed on me. The look of recognition was followed immediately by a look of repulsion. Jesus, Hunter said loud enough for the hostess to look up from her reservation book. What is that smell? It smells like burning rubber and stale sweat. He took a step toward me, but then recoiled, waving his hand in front of his face. Nia, seriously. Did you bathe in a vat of motor oil before you came here? You smell like a mechanic shop on a hot day. Tasha let out a sharp, cruel giggle. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small bottle of perfume, spraying it into the air between us as if I were a contagion that needed to be neutralized. You are literally ruining the atmosphere, she said, her voice dripping with venom. This is a 5-star establishment, Nia. People are trying to enjoy their lobster, and you walk in smelling like a factory accident. You are making the air heavy. It is suffocating. I felt the heat rise up my neck, burning my cheeks. I was painfully aware of the contrast between us. They were pristine, dressed in silk and cashmere, smelling of Chanel and expensive soap. I was wearing my work clothes, and despite my best efforts, the scent of industrial solvent and machine grease clung to me. It was the smell of hard work. It was the smell of the money that paid their bills. But to them, it was just the stench of failure. I tried to speak to defend myself, but my throat closed up. I held out the bag slightly, my hand trembling. I just wanted to give Mom her gift, I managed to whisper. Hunter laughed, a harsh barking sound that echoed in the high ceilings of the lobby. Gift, he scoffed, looking me up and down with eyes that stripped away every ounce of my dignity. The best gift you could give us is to go back to whatever hole you crawled out of and scrub yourself raw. You are embarrassing us in front of the staff. Look at the hostess. She is terrified you are going to touch something. My mother stood behind them silent. She did not defend me. She did not scold them for their cruelty. She simply took a handkerchief from her purse and pressed it delicately to her nose, turning her face away as if the mere sight of me was physically painful for her. That silence, that refusal to even look at me, was louder than any insult Hunter could have screamed. It confirmed that in this lobby under these crystal chandeliers, I was not family. I was pollution. I ignored Hunter and Tasha. I pushed past their insults and focused solely on the woman standing behind them. My hands were trembling violently as I extended the glossy paper bag toward her. Mom, I said, my voice barely loud enough to be heard over the restaurant music. I know I was not invited to eat with you. I respect that. But I did not want today to pass without giving you something. I worked double shifts to get this for you. For a moment, she just stared at me. Her expression was unreadable. Then slowly she reached out her hand. But she did not take the bag from me. She did not wrap her fingers around the handle in a gesture of acceptance. Instead, she used just her thumb and forefinger to pinch the very edge of the rope strap. She held it away from her body as if she were picking up a soiled tissue or a dead rodent. She lifted it slightly into the air, inspecting the logo with a critical squint. Nia, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than ice. I was very clear in my text message. Successful children only. She let the bag dangle there between us, spinning slowly in the air. And looking at this sad little package, I see you still do not understand what that word means. This is the outlet version, isn't it? This is from the clearance bin. I felt my stomach drop to the floor. It is genuine leather, I stammered, trying to defend my effort. It cost me $300. She cut me off with a sharp intake of breath. It is last season's stock, Nia. Do you really think I would be caught dead carrying an accessory that is a year out of date? Do you think I want my friends to see me holding a discount bag while they are carrying Hermes and Chanel? You are not giving me a gift. You are giving me an obligation to dispose of your bad taste. Then she did it. She simply opened her fingers. Gravity took over. The bag hit the polished marble floor with a soft thud. It tipped over, spilling the white tissue paper out onto the tiles. The sound of it hitting the ground was quiet, but to me it sounded like a gunshot. We have a reservation at the spa, she said, smoothing her dress as if the mere proximity to me had wrinkled it. Go home, Nia, and take your trash with you. She turned and began to walk toward the exit doors. She did not walk around the bag I had dropped. She stepped right over it, lifting her designer heel high to avoid touching the gift I had slaved over. She walked over my love like it was debris on the sidewalk. Tasha followed her, kicking the bag slightly to the side with the toe of her shoe as she passed, giggling as they disappeared into the sunlight, leaving me alone in the lobby with my rejected heart lying on the floor. The heavy wooden doors swung shut behind them, sealing them into their world of luxury, and leaving me in the cold reality of the foyer. I stood there for a long moment. The silence was absolute. I could feel the eyes of the hostess burning into my back. She looked at me not with pity, but with impatient expectation, waiting for the trash to remove itself. A strange thing happened then. The tears that had been threatening to spill over suddenly evaporated. The hot shame that had flushed my cheeks cooled into something hard and brittle. It was the feeling of a bridge finally burning down. I realized I had spent 30 years begging for a seat at a table where I was not welcome. I had starved myself for crumbs of affection while they feasted on my insecurity. I looked down at the beige bag lying on the polished marble floor. The tissue paper was torn and spilling out like guts. It looked pathetic. It looked exactly like my relationship with my family. I bent down and picked it up. I did not dust it off. I did not try to salvage it or think about returning it to get my money back. I walked over to the large brass trash receptacle near the entrance. With a steady hand, I dropped the bag inside. It landed with a hollow thud among the discarded napkins and receipts. That $300 was a tuition fee for the most expensive lesson I ever learned. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen was still lit up with the family group chat. Tasha had just posted a selfie of the three of them at the table raising their champagne flutes. The caption read, "Family first," followed by a heart emoji. The irony tasted like blood in my mouth. I did not reply. I did not write a long dramatic farewell letter explaining my pain. They did not deserve my words. I simply tapped the settings menu. I selected the group chat and hit Leave Group. Then I went to my contacts. Joyce Washington. Block contact. Tasha Washington. Block contact. Hunter Davis. Block contact. One by one, their names disappeared from my digital life. I watched the spinning wheel confirm that they could never call, text, or FaceTime me again. It was a digital amputation, swift and permanent. I slid the phone back into my pocket, and for the first time in years, I felt lighter. The crushing weight of their expectations was gone, left in that trash can with the purse. I pushed open the front doors and stepped out into the humid Atlanta afternoon. I did not look back at the window to see if they were watching. I did not care. I walked to my beat-up Honda Civic, got in, and turned the key. The engine sputtered to life, a rough sound that I used to be ashamed of, but now sounded like freedom. As I drove away from the ivy, I made a vow to myself. The next time they saw me, they would not be looking down at me. They would be looking up, and they would be blinded by the glare of my success. I shifted into gear and drove straight toward the only place where I actually belonged. The factory. The warehouse became my sanctuary. While my family viewed the Apex facility as a dungeon of low-class labor, I viewed it as a puzzle waiting to be solved. They saw me as a packer, a pair of hands hired to put widgets into boxes for $15 an hour. What they did not know was that while they were sleeping, I was studying. For 4 years, I had sacrificed every weekend and every spare dollar to an online degree program. While Tasha was curating her Instagram feed and Hunter was failing at startups, I was earning my Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. I kept it a secret because I knew if I told them, they would find a way to diminish it. They would ask why I did not go to an Ivy League school or why I was not working at a prestigious firm. So I kept my mouth shut and my eyes open. I started staying late after my shift ended. I told the floor manager I was waiting for traffic to die down, but in reality I was analyzing the assembly line. I watched how the machines moved where the bottlenecks were and why the hydraulic presses overheated every Thursday. The factory was bleeding money through inefficiency, and nobody seemed to notice except the girl taping boxes at the end of the line. One rainy Tuesday night, everything changed. The main conveyor belt, which we affectionately called Big Bertha, seized up with a grinding screech that sounded like metal tearing through bone. Production ground to a halt. The silence in the factory was terrifying. Every minute the belt was stopped cost the company thousands of dollars. Mr. Henderson, the owner, was pacing the floor in a panic. He was a good man, but he was old and tired, and his lead mechanic had gone home with the flu. He was on the phone screaming at a repair service that told him they could not come out until the morning. I watched him hang up the phone, his face gray with stress. I knew that if this order did not ship by morning, Apex might lose its contract with the auto manufacturer. I put down my tape gun. I walked over to the utility closet and grabbed the red toolbox. I did not ask for permission. I walked straight up to Big Bertha and crawled underneath the chassis. Mr. Henderson shouted at me. "Nia, what are you doing? Get away from there, you are going to get hurt." I ignored him. I shined my flashlight into the gear assembly. It was exactly what I suspected. The timing belt had slipped because of a worn tensioner bearing. It was a simple fix if you knew what you were looking for. I grabbed a wrench and went to work. Grease dripped onto my face, mixing with the sweat on my forehead, but I did not care. For 20 minutes, the only sound was the clicking of my ratchet and my own breathing. I tightened the tensioner, realigned the belt, and tapped the casing with my hammer to settle it. I slid out from under the machine, wiped my hands on my pants, and looked at Mr. Henderson. "Try it now," I said. He looked at me like I was crazy, but he walked over to the control panel and hit the green button. The machine groaned once, and then purred to life. The belt began to move smoothly. The rhythm of production returned. Mr. Henderson stared at the moving belt and then looked down at me, his eyes wide with shock. "Nia," he asked, his voice trembling slightly, "since when do you know how to fix industrial machinery?" I looked him in the eye and gave him the first real smile I had worn in months. "Since I started reading the schematics in the break room for fun," I said. That night, I did not ask for overtime pay. I did not ask for a raise. I was playing a much longer game. I was not just fixing a machine, I was auditing my future empire. The next morning, the intercom crackled to life above the factory floor. The voice of the floor manager boomed through the speakers. "Nia Washington, please report to Mr. Henderson's office immediately." The hum of the machines seemed to drop away. My coworkers looked at me with expressions of pity. In a factory environment, being called to the main office usually meant one thing: you were getting fired. My stomach turned into a knot of cold dread. I was convinced that my unauthorized repair job the night before had violated some liability clause. I wiped my hands on my jeans, took a deep breath, and began the long walk across the concrete floor. I prepared my defense in my head. I would tell him I was just trying to save the production run. I would beg if I had to. I needed this job. I knocked on the heavy oak door and entered. Mr. Henderson was sitting behind a desk that looked as old as the building itself, covered in stacks of paper and blueprints. He did not look up immediately. He was studying a notebook. My heart stopped. It was my notebook. The cheap black composition book where I sketched out ideas for optimizing the assembly line during my lunch breaks. I must have left it by the conveyor belt in my haste to fix the machine. "Sit down, Nia," he said, his voice gruff. I sat on the edge of the hard wooden chair. "Mr. Henderson, I can explain. I know I am not a mechanic, and I should not have touched the equipment, but—" He held up a hand to stop me. He tapped a finger on my open notebook. "Did you draw these?" he asked. He pointed to a sketch of a modified sorting arm that would reduce jamming by 20%. "Yes, sir," I whispered. "I was just doodling." He flipped the page. "And this calculation here, this estimate on the energy savings if we switch to a variable frequency drive. Is this accurate?" I straightened my spine slightly. "Yes, sir. I ran the numbers 3 times. The current motors are wasting power during the idle cycles." Mr. Henderson closed the book and finally looked at me over his reading glasses. He leaned back in his chair and sighed. A heavy, tired sound. "Nia, I have been running this place for 40 years. I have hired hundreds of people. Most of them just want to punch the clock and go home. They do not care if the ship sinks as long as they get paid." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the factory floor. "I am 70 years old, Nia. My children are doctors and lawyers in New York. They have no interest in this place. They think it is dirty. They think it is beneath them." The words echoed the exact sentiment of my own family. I stayed silent. "I need someone who sees what I see," he continued, turning back to me. "I need someone who understands the heartbeat of these machines. I do not need a packer, Nia. I can hire anyone to tape a box. I need a technical manager." I blinked. "Excuse me? I am offering you a promotion," he said. "You will come off the line. You will oversee maintenance and process improvement. You will implement these designs of yours, and if they work, we will talk about a percentage of the savings as a bonus." I sat there stunned. My family had looked at my dirty hands and saw shame. This man looked at my dirty hands and saw value. "I am not a licensed engineer yet," I said, my voice trembling. "I am still finishing my degree online." "I do not care about a piece of paper on the wall," he said firmly. "I care about the person who crawled under a moving machine to save my business. Do you want the job or not?" I looked at him and then down at my hands. "Yes, sir," I said. "I want the job." "Good," he said, pushing a file across the desk. "Your salary doubles starting today. Now get out of here and go fix the packaging unit on line 4. It has been making a funny noise all morning." I walked out of that office not as a laborer but as a leader. And as I walked back onto the floor, I realized that while my family was busy polishing their image, I was about to start building an empire. The next 3 years were a blur of motion and evolution. It was like watching a time-lapse video of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, only the butterfly was made of steel and ambition. The first thing to go was the blue uniform. I remember folding it neatly and placing it in the bottom of my locker like a relic from a past life. I traded my steel-toed boots for sensible flats, and then eventually for Italian leather heels that clicked with authority against the concrete floors. My days of scrubbing grease from my cuticles were replaced by nights of scrubbing through profit and loss statements until my eyes burned. I became obsessed with the machinery of business, just as I had been obsessed with the machinery of the factory. I learned that a contract could be just as complex as a transmission, and a negotiation required the same delicate touch as calibrating a sensor. Mr. Henderson became more than a boss, he became a mentor. He taught me how to read people, how to spot a bluff in a supplier meeting, and how to squeeze efficiency out of a supply chain without breaking the spirit of the workers. I absorbed everything. While Tasha was busy curating her online persona, I was curating a portfolio. While Hunter was burning through cash, I was learning how to generate free cash flow. Then came the day that changed everything permanently. It was a Tuesday much like the one where I had fixed the conveyor belt, but the atmosphere was different. Mr. Henderson called me into his office. The room was packed with boxes. He was retiring. He looked at me with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. He told me he had received offers from private equity firms in New York. They wanted to buy Apex, strip it for parts, fire the staff, and sell the land. He told me he could not let that happen. Then he slid a thick document across the mahogany desk. It was a buy-sell agreement. He was offering to sell me the company, not just the management rights, but the controlling interest. He had worked out a financing plan that allowed me to pay him back from the future profits. I stared at the paper. It was a terrifying amount of debt, but it was also the key to my freedom. I picked up the pen. It felt heavier than a sledgehammer. With one signature, I ceased being an employee and became the owner. I rebranded everything. I reinvested every single dollar of profit back into the facility. I brought in robotics. I painted the floors a pristine white. I upgraded the ventilation until the air smelled like ozone instead of oil. But I made one crucial decision. I kept my name off the building. I did not issue a press release. I did not update my LinkedIn profile. To the outside world, and especially to my family, I was still just a worker. I became the silent power behind Apex Group. I was the ghost in the machine controlling a multi-million-dollar empire from the shadows, while my family continued to believe I was nothing, and that anonymity was my greatest weapon. While I was building a fortress of steel and equity, my mother was busy reinforcing her castle of cards. The Washington family home was always buzzing with activity. To the outside observer, it looked like the epicenter of high society in Atlanta. My mother threw a summer solstice party that was the talk of the neighborhood. Caterers circulated with trays of truffle arancini, and vintage champagne flowed like water. Joyce moved through the crowd in a silk caftan, laughing at jokes that were not funny and accepting compliments on a life she could no longer afford. She posted photos to Facebook every hour on the hour. Her captions were always the same: living my best life, blessed and highly favored. She curated an image of effortless wealth that made everyone else envious. But the camera of reality captures things that an iPhone filter misses. If you looked closely, you could see the hairline cracks in the foundation. The landscaping service had stopped coming 2 months ago because the check bounced, so the grass was starting to brown at the edges. The pool pump was broken, leaving the water a slightly murky green that they tried to hide with floating candles. And then there was the living room. It was the stage for her greatest performance. She sat on her favorite armchair, holding court with the neighbors, bragging about Hunter's latest business venture. She told them he was on the verge of a breakthrough that would change the tech industry forever. What the guests did not see was what lay directly underneath the cushion she was sitting on. Earlier that morning, the mailman had delivered a stack of envelopes. They were not invitations. They were final notices. Red ink stamped across the front, like a scarlet letter. Foreclosure warning. Past due. Immediate action required. My mother had snatched them from the mailbox before the neighbors could see. In a panic, she had shoved them under the velvet seat cushion and sat on top of them. She was literally sitting on a ticking time bomb of debt while sipping a $20 glass of wine. She believed that if she hid the bills, they ceased to exist. She was not the only one pretending. Tasha was there smiling until her cheeks hurt, showing off a new diamond bracelet. I knew for a fact it was cubic zirconia, but she told everyone it was a gift from Hunter to celebrate his startup's first round of funding. Hunter stood by the bar looking sweaty and pale. He was drinking faster than anyone else. His eyes were darting around the room, not looking for investors, but looking for anyone who might ask him a hard question about where the money was actually coming from. He was drowning in a sea of his own lies, and my mother was handing him an anchor instead of a life jacket. They were a perfect unit of dysfunction, enabling each other's delusions, because facing the truth was too painful. They did not know that the bill was coming due, and the creditor they would have to face was the daughter they had thrown away. Across the city, in a rented office space that cost more per month than my mother's mortgage used to be, Hunter was unraveling. The panoramic view of the skyline could not distract from the fact that he was screaming into his iPhone. "You cannot call the loan yet," he shouted, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "It is a liquidity issue, not a solvency issue. I just need 10 more days." He ended the call and threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the leather couch that he had put on the company credit card. The startup he had bragged about for years, Next Gen Dynamics, was nothing but a shell game. He had burned through the seed capital on branding consultants' launch parties and a Tesla lease. There was no product, there was no revenue. There was only a gaping black hole where the money used to be. But the worst part was not his own bankruptcy. It was what he had done to my mother. 6 months prior, he had sat Joyce down in her living room and held her hand. He told her about a guaranteed opportunity in cryptocurrency. He used words like leverage and unprecedented growth. He convinced a 60-year-old woman to take a second mortgage on her paid-off house. He took $200,000 of her equity, promising to double it in a quarter. He did not double it. He vaporized it. The market crashed and the digital wallet where he kept her security net was now empty. He had not told her yet. He was paying the monthly interest out of his dwindling personal savings just to keep the bank from sending letters to her house. But the well was dry. He was days away from being exposed as a fraud and a thief. He sat at his glass desk, running his hands through his thinning hair. He needed a miracle. He needed a contract real enough to show the bank and unlock a new line of credit. He had one lead. A major logistics firm needed a local partner for a massive packaging order. If he could secure that contract, he could fake stability for another year. He began frantically searching Google for local manufacturing plants. He needed someone cheap, someone desperate, someone he could bully into a bad deal. His eyes scanned the search results and landed on a name: Apex Group. He smiled. He had no idea that the miracle he was looking for was actually his executioner waiting in the dark. The boutique smelled of lavender and money. It was Tasha's favorite sanctuary, a place where the lighting was designed to make you look 10 years younger, and the price tags were discreetly tucked inside the seams. She had spent an hour selecting a gown for the upcoming charity gala. It was a shimmering silver piece that cost $4,000. She did not have $4,000. In fact, she did not have $400 available in her checking account. But shopping was Tasha's therapy. It was the only way she knew how to silence the whispering voice in her head that said her life was falling apart. She believed that if she looked rich, she would eventually become rich again. It was a magical thinking that had led her to the brink of financial ruin. She approached the counter with a practiced smile, tossing her hair over her shoulder. The sales associate, a woman named Chloe whom Tasha had known for years, began to ring up the items. Tasha handed over her platinum credit card. It was heavy and cold in her hand, a symbol of the status she was desperate to maintain. She watched Chloe insert the chip. She held her breath. The seconds stretched out agonizingly long. Then came the sound. A sharp buzz that cut through the soft jazz music playing in the background. Chloe frowned and looked at the screen. "I am sorry, Mrs. Davis. The card was declined. Do you have another form of payment?" The air left the room. Tasha felt the blood drain from her face. She felt the eyes of the other shoppers on her back burning holes in her expensive blouse. She forced a laugh, a brittle, high-pitched sound that sounded nothing like joy. "Oh, how ridiculous," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hunter must have put a travel freeze on the accounts because of his upcoming business trip to Dubai. He is always so overprotective with security. Try it again." Chloe tried it again. The same buzz, the same rejection. Tasha snatched the card back, her hands shaking slightly. "I will have to call the bank and sort this out," she said, her voice tight. "I cannot believe they would embarrass a loyal customer like this. Put the dress on hold. I will be back in 20 minutes. She walked out of the store with her head held high, tapping furiously on her phone, as if she were actually calling a banker. She did not stop until she reached her car. Once she was inside the safety of her leased Range Rover, the performance ended. She dropped the phone into the cup holder and gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. Then she screamed. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure panic. She slumped forward, resting her forehead against the leather wheel, and sobbed. She cried for the dress she could not buy. She cried for the lies she had to tell. But mostly she cried because she was trapped. She was married to a man who was drowning them in debt, and she was too proud to ask for a life raft. She thought about Nia. She thought about how she had mocked her sister's cheap clothes and old car. And now, sitting in this luxury SUV, she realized with a sickening jolt that Nia was the only one in the family who was actually free. Tasha checked her makeup in the rearview mirror, wiped away the mascara streaks, and put her sunglasses on. She had to go home and pretend everything was perfect. She started the engine, hoping she had enough gas to get there, because she certainly couldn't afford to fill the tank. The dining room of the Washington estate had hosted senators and celebrities in the past, but tonight it hosted only desperation. The crystal chandelier above the table cast a cold, unforgiving light on the three people sitting in silence. Dinner was a roast chicken that had gone cold because no one had the appetite to eat it. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, counting down the seconds to their inevitable collapse. Hunter was the first to break the silence. He did not look up from his plate. He simply said the words that would shatter the last remnant of their peace. "I need $50,000, and I need it by Friday." My mother froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. She looked at him, blinking slowly, as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Did you say 50,000? Hunter slammed his fist onto the table, making the silverware jump. "Do not look at me like that, Joyce. It is a liquidity crunch. My investors are dragging their feet on the wire transfer. If I do not make payroll this week, my developers will walk, and the code is locked on their servers. The company dies. I need a bridge loan, just for 2 weeks." Joyce set her fork down slowly. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking gray and old. "Hunter," she whispered, "I do not have it. The accounts are empty. I gave you the last of the liquid cash for the server upgrades last month. The only thing left is the house equity, and the bank has already frozen that line of credit." Tasha, who had been scrolling through her phone, suddenly looked up. "What do you mean the accounts are empty? I have a deposit for the venue due next week. Are you telling me we are broke?" She looked from her husband to her mother, her eyes widening in horror. "You told me the business was booming, Hunter. You told me we were the next Silicon Valley unicorn." Hunter turned on her, his face twisting into a sneer. "It would be booming if I did not have a wife who spends money like she is royalty. Do you know how much that American Express bill was last month, Tasha? $7,000 on shoes. Shoes, Tasha. While I am trying to build a legacy, you are trying to build a wardrobe." Tasha stood up, knocking her chair back. "Do not you dare blame this on me. You are the one who insisted on leasing the Porsche. You are the one who needed the office with the view. You are a fraud, Hunter. You have been bleeding us dry for years." Joyce put her hands over her ears. "Stop it," she screamed. "Both of you stop it immediately. We are a family. We do not fight about money like common people." "We are not common people," Joyce Hunter spat back, standing up to loom over her. "We are broke people. There is a difference. Common people have jobs, we have debt, we have— Unless you want the sheriff to put an eviction notice on that front door, you need to find me that money. Call your friends. Sell your jewelry. I do not care what you do. Just fix it." The toxic silence returned heavier than before. They sat there, the three of them, realizing that without the glue of money to hold them together, they actually hated each other. They were drowning, and instead of helping each other swim, they were climbing on top of one another to breathe. Hunter stormed out of the room, leaving Tasha sobbing into her napkin, and my mother staring at the cold chicken, realizing that the golden child she had bet everything on was actually a parasite. It was 3 in the morning when the miracle finally arrived. Hunter was sitting in his darkened office, staring at the glow of his laptop screen, contemplating whether he should flee the country or file for bankruptcy. Then a notification chimed. It was an email from Sterling Global, one of the largest distribution conglomerates in the country. The subject line read, "Urgent request for proposal, Sustainable Packaging Initiative." Hunter clicked it so fast, he almost knocked over his coffee. The email was the kind of golden ticket that entrepreneurs dream about. Sterling Global was launching a new eco-friendly product line and needed a local Atlanta partner to handle the packaging and logistics. The contract was valued at $4 million a year. It was enough to wipe out his debt, pay off my mother's mortgage, and lease a new Porsche. There was just one problem. The contract required a partner with a fully automated ISO-certified facility capable of handling high-volume output with zero margin for error. Hunter did not have a factory. He had a WeWork membership and a slick website. To get this money, he needed to find a subcontractor. He needed a dumb local factory he could bully into doing the work for cheap while he took the credit and the profit. He opened a new tab and typed Atlanta Automated Packaging Solutions into Google. He scrolled past the big national chains knowing they would be too expensive. He needed someone hungry, someone under the radar. His eyes landed on a search result halfway down the first page, Apex Group. The website was clean and modern, featuring videos of robotic arms moving with hypnotic precision. The text boasted about their state-of-the-art facility and their new proprietary sorting technology. Hunter leaned in closer. He had never heard of Apex Group before. It must be new or recently revamped. He checked the leadership page. It was blank. No CEO photo, no bio, just a generic mission statement about efficiency and innovation. Perfect, Hunter whispered to the empty room. He assumed it was run by some faceless corporate board or an old-timer who didn't know the value of what he had. He saw an opportunity to act as the middleman to present Apex's capabilities as his own. He drafted an email immediately using his most authoritative corporate speak. He mentioned synergy and strategic alignment. He demanded a meeting within 48 hours. He hit send with a smirk on his face, thinking he had just pulled off the heist of the century. He had no idea that the notification for that email did not go to a faceless board. It went directly to the phone lying on the nightstand of the woman he had called trash. He thought he was fishing for a minnow, but he had just hooked a shark. My corner office at Apex Group was a fortress of glass and steel, located on the top floor overlooking the factory that had built my fortune. It was a stark contrast to the noisy, humid warehouse floor where I had started. Here the air was cool and smelled of expensive espresso and ambition. I was reviewing the quarterly projections when my executive assistant Marcus knocked on the door. He walked in holding a tablet with a perplexed expression on his face. "Mrs. Washington," he said, "we just received a rather aggressive request for a meeting. It is from a man named Hunter Davis, representing a company called Next Gen Dynamics. He claims he has a proposition that will revolutionize our supply chain. He is demanding a sit-down with the owner within 48 hours. I stopped typing. The sound of that name made the hair on my arms stand up. It was not fear, it was the thrill of a predator who just watched the prey wander into the trap. I slowly swiveled my chair around and extended my hand for the tablet. "Let me see that," I said. I read Hunter's email. It was a masterpiece of desperation masked as arrogance. He used words like strategic synergy and vertical integration, but I could read between the lines. He was begging. He was broke, and he needed a vendor who would extend him credit on a handshake. He had no idea he was emailing the sister-in-law he had mocked for smelling like oil. He thought he was reaching out to a stranger. I looked up at Marcus. He was waiting for me to tell him to delete the email. We usually ignored cold calls from failing startups. Reply to him, I said, my voice steady and cold. Tell him we are interested. Tell him we have capacity for his order and we are willing to expedite the contract. Marcus looked surprised. "Are you sure, ma'am? His financials look unstable." "I know exactly what his financials look like," I said, standing up and walking to the window. That is why there is a condition. Tell Mr. Davis that due to the high-risk nature of his request and the volume of the order, Apex Group requires all primary investors and personal guarantors to be present at the signing. I turned back to Marcus and smiled, a smile that did not reach my eyes. I happen to know that his primary investor is his mother-in-law and his business partner is his wife. Tell him to bring Joyce and Tasha Washington. If they are not in the room, there is no deal. Marcus nodded, typing the notes furiously. And should I tell him who the owner is? No, I said. Let them think they are meeting an old man. Let them think they are walking into a room they can dominate. I want to see their faces when they realize who holds the pen. Schedule the meeting for Friday at noon. And Marcus, order the expensive catering. I want them to feel comfortable right before I destroy them. As the door closed, I looked out at the Atlanta skyline. The pieces were moving into place. They were coming to my house now. And in my house, we play by my rules. The trap was set, and they were running toward it with their eyes closed. Hunter burst through the front door of the Washington estate like a man who had just won the lottery. The gloomy atmosphere from the dinner the night before evaporated instantly. He was holding a bottle of champagne that he had definitely bought on credit. "Ladies, pack your bags," he shouted, popping the cork and letting the foam spill onto the hardwood floor. "Next Gen is back in business." My mother and Tasha looked up from the sofa where they had been sitting in miserable silence, contemplating which jewelry to pawn. "Hunter, what happened?" Joyce asked, her eyes lighting up with that familiar hunger for status. "I did it," Hunter bragged, pouring the wine into unwashed glasses. "I secured a manufacturing partner. Apex Group. They are a massive local outfit. Top-tier automation. I worked my magic and convinced them to prioritize our order. We are talking about a $4 million revenue stream starting next month. The bank will unfreeze everything by Monday." The transformation in the room was instant and terrifying. Tasha, who had been crying about being poor 12 hours ago, immediately grabbed her phone. "Oh my God, Hunter, I knew you could do it," she squealed. "Does this mean I can get the dress? Does this mean we can go to the Maldives for our anniversary?" "Yes, yes, buy whatever you want," Hunter said, waving his hand dismissively. "But there is a catch, a small formality. The owners of Apex want to meet the board of directors. Since you two are listed as officers, they requested your presence at the signing tomorrow." Joyce sat up straighter, fluffing her hair. "Well, of course they do," she said, preening like a peacock. "They probably want to ensure they are doing business with reputable people. It makes sense they would want to meet the matriarch of the family. I will wear my St. John knit suit. We need to look the part of a power dynasty." They did not ask any questions about the contract terms. They did not ask about the production schedule or the profit margins. They only heard the word money and their brains shut off. Within minutes, they were already spending the imaginary profits. Joyce was talking about repaving the driveway to impress the neighbors. Tasha was browsing first-class flights to Europe. They were vultures circling a carcass that did not exist yet. They were so blinded by their own greed that they did not stop to think why a manufacturing firm would demand a personal meeting with a silent partner mother-in-law. They just assumed it was because they were special. They assumed the world owed them homage. They toasted to their brilliance, unaware that the champagne they were drinking was the last sweet thing they would taste for a very long time. The white Range Rover looked like a spaceship gliding through the grimy streets of the industrial district. Inside, the climate control was set to a crisp 68 degrees, and the leather seats smelled of conditioning cream. Outside, the world was a blur of gray concrete chain-link fences and the heavy machinery of American manufacturing. To my family, this was not the engine of the economy. It was a wasteland. Joyce sat in the back seat, clutching her designer purse to her chest, as if she were afraid the poverty outside might somehow seep through the tinted windows and infect her. She looked out at a group of workers eating their lunch on a loading dock and shuddered visibly. "Hunter, why on earth do we have to come all the way out here?" she complained. Her voice was high and tight. "This place is dreadful. Look at that dust. I just had the car detailed yesterday, and now it is going to be covered in soot. I feel like I need a tetanus shot just breathing the air near this place. Can't we just meet them at a steakhouse in the city like civilized people? Hunter laughed a sound that was meant to be reassuring, but came out sharp and condescending. He adjusted his rearview mirror to look at her. Relax, Joyce. This is where the magic happens. Or at least where the grunt work happens. We cannot meet them in the city because we need to inspect the facility. It is part of the due diligence. Besides, we want them to feel honored that we came to them. It gives us the upper hand. He turned the car down a long avenue lined with warehouses. Just think of it like a field trip. He continued, his tone oozing with arrogance. Think of it like we are going to the zoo. We are just going to watch the animals perform their little tricks. We will walk in, look at their machines, nod our heads, and let them fawn over us. These people are blue-collar, Joyce. They are probably intimidated by anyone wearing a suit that costs more than their car. We walk in there, we flash a little smile, and they will sign whatever contract I put in front of them just to make us like them. Tasha pulled down the sun visor and checked her reflection for the 10th time. She applied another layer of lip gloss. I do not care about the animals, she said, snapping the mirror shut. I just hope the floors are paved. I am wearing suede heels, Hunter. If I step in a puddle of oil or mud, I am going to be furious. You promised me this would be quick. I have a nail appointment at 3. Do not worry, Babe, Hunter said, patting her knee. We will be in and out, 30 minutes tops. We sign the papers, we let them give us a quick tour, so they feel important, and then we leave with a $4 million deal in our pocket. It is going to be the easiest money we ever made. They drove past the rusted gates of the older factories, their eyes scanning for the address. They were expecting a crumbling brick building with broken windows and a gravel lot. They were expecting noise and dirt and chaos. They had prepared themselves to hold their breath and look down their noses. They had absolutely no idea that the facility they were approaching was not a relic of the past, but a vision of the future. As Hunter turned the steering wheel to pull into the entrance of Apex Group, he was still smiling that predatory smile, convinced he was the shark entering the water. He did not realize he was actually the bait. The Range Rover crunched over the gravel of the visitor parking lot, but that was where the grit ended, and the shock began. Hunter killed the engine, and for a moment nobody moved. They were sitting in the shadow of the Apex Group main facility, and it was absolutely nothing like the mental image they had constructed. They had expected a rusted corrugated metal shed surrounded by weeds. Instead, they were staring at a sprawling architectural marvel made of brushed steel and blue-tempered glass. It looked less like a factory and more like the headquarters of a Silicon Valley tech giant. The landscaping was manicured to millimeter precision, with geometric hedges that were greener than the dying lawn at my mother's estate. Hunter cleared his throat, adjusting his tie in the rearview mirror. Well, he said, his voice slightly higher than usual. They certainly spent some money on the facade. Let us go inside and see if the operations match the curb appeal. They stepped out of the car. Joyce checked her shoes immediately, expecting dust, but the walkway was paved with smooth slate. They approached the massive glass sliding doors which parted silently to admit them. As they stepped into the lobby, the first thing that hit them was the air. It was not hot or stagnant. It was crisp, cool, and smelled faintly of ozone and citrus. My mother stopped dead in her tracks. Her hand, which had been covering her nose, slowly lowered. She looked around, blinking rapidly. The lobby was a soaring atrium with 30-foot ceilings. In the center was a living wall of moss and ferns that acted as a natural air filter. To the left was a floor-to-ceiling glass wall that overlooked the main production floor. This was the view that usually silenced visitors, and today was no exception. Hunter, Tasha, and Joyce walked to the glass and looked down. Below them was not a chaotic mess of sweating bodies and grime. It was a synchronized ballet of automation. Hundreds of orange robotic arms moved in perfect unison, lifting, sorting, and assembling packages with a speed that the human eye could barely track. Autonomous guided vehicles glided silently along magnetic tracks on the floor, carrying pallets. The floor itself was coated in white epoxy resin, so polished it reflected the LED lights above. It was cleaner than an operating room. My God, Tasha whispered, pressing her hand against the glass. It looks like a science fiction movie. Where are all the people? Hunter tried to recover his composure. Efficiency, babe, he said, trying to sound like an expert. This is what I was talking about. High-level automation. It cuts down on labor costs. Joyce looked at the scene with a mixture of awe and irritation. She was annoyed that she could not find anything to criticize. She had prepared herself to be disgusted, to feel superior to the dirt. But standing here looking at a facility that was worth more than her entire neighborhood, she felt a shrinking sensation. She felt small. She turned to the reception desk where a young woman in a sharp navy blazer was typing on a holographic keyboard. Joyce straightened her jacket, trying to reclaim her sense of importance. She marched up to the desk. "We are the Davis party," she announced loudly. "We are here to meet the ownership. And do try to be quick. We have a very tight schedule today." The receptionist looked up with a polite professional smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Of course, Mrs. Washington. The CEO is expecting you. Please take the elevator to the executive suite on the 4th floor." They stepped into the elevator, the doors closing with a soft chime. As they ascended, Joyce let out a breath she had been holding. "Well, at least they have good taste," she sniffed. "Maybe this won't be a total waste of time after all." She had no idea that the elevator was not taking her to a meeting. It was taking her to a reckoning. The executive suite was a masterclass in intimidation, designed to make visitors feel small before they even entered the boardroom. The walls were lined with industry awards, and the furniture was sleek black Italian leather. Hunter immediately threw his suit jacket onto a chair and flopped onto the sofa, claiming the space as if he already owned it. He lifted his legs and dropped his heavy dress shoes onto the pristine glass coffee table, leaving a smear of gray dust on the surface. He laced his fingers behind his head and let out a sigh of satisfaction. "This is the life," he said, closing his eyes. "I could get used to this." He was acting like the deal was already signed and the commission check was already cleared. He did not see the disrespect in his actions, he only saw his own comfort. Tasha was prowling the room like a bored cat. She walked over to the refreshment station, which was stocked with premium snacks and beverages. She picked up a bottle of sparkling water, inspected the label, and wrinkled her nose in disgust. "San Pellegrino?" She scoffed loud enough for the administrative assistant outside the glass door to hear. "Do they not have anything better? I specifically drink artisanal spring water from Norway. This tastes like minerals and poverty." She dropped the bottle back onto the tray with a clatter and wiped her hands on her dress as if the bottle had been sticky. She was broke and desperate, but she clung to her snobbery like a life raft. But it was Joyce who was the most agitated. She kept checking her diamond-encrusted watch, tapping her foot rhythmically against the floor. 15 minutes had passed since they arrived. To a woman like Joyce, waiting was an insult. It implied that someone else's time was more valuable than hers. She stood up and marched to the glass door, sliding it open with aggressive force. The young executive assistant named Marcus looked up from his desk. "Excuse me," Joyce snapped, her voice shrill and demanding. "We have been sitting in this fishbowl for 20 minutes. My son-in-law is a very busy man. He has calls to make. We cannot just sit here twiddling our thumbs while your boss finishes his lunch. Go in there and tell him the Davis family is ready to leave if he does not come out right now." Marcus remained calm. He adjusted his glasses and offered a polite, rehearsed smile. "I apologize for the delay, Mrs. Washington. The CEO is concluding a conference call with our partners in Tokyo. It is a critical negotiation. He will be with you shortly." Joyce huffed, crossing her arms. "Tokyo," she repeated, mocking his tone. "I doubt that. He is probably just trying to make us wait to feel important. It is a classic power move. Well, it won't work on me. You tell him he has 5 minutes or we walk. And when we walk, that $4 million deal walks with us." She slammed the door shut and turned back to Hunter and Tasha. "The audacity of these people," she hissed. "We are practically saving their business and they treat us like vendors." Hunter laughed from the sofa, not bothering to take his feet off the table. Let them play their games, Joyce. It just shows they are nervous. They know they need us more than we need them. Let them sweat. When I walk into that room, I am going to demand an extra 5% discount for this wait. They sat there in their bubble of delusion, completely unaware of the reality. They thought the delay was incompetence. They did not realize it was a calculated stress test. Behind the double doors of the boardroom, I was watching them on the security feed. I was watching Hunter dirty my table. I was watching Tasha insult my hospitality. And I was watching my mother abuse my staff. I was letting them dig their own graves, one arrogant comment at a time. And now it was time to hand them the shovel. The heavy double doors swung open with a hydraulic hiss that silenced the room instantly. Hunter scrambled to get his feet off the coffee table, brushing the dust from his shoes in a panic. Tasha straightened her dress, and my mother put on her best fake smile, the one she reserved for bank managers and pastors. They turned their attention to the figure standing in the doorway. Me. I walked into the room with a stride I had practiced for 3 years. I was not wearing the stained blue coveralls they remembered. I was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit cut from Italian wool that draped perfectly over my shoulders. My heels were sharp and authoritative, sinking into the plush carpet, but they did not see my face. I had covered the lower half of my face with a black industrial-grade mask, and my eyes were hidden behind oversized, dark sunglasses. To them, I looked eccentric, perhaps a bit germophobic, but undeniably powerful. Marcus stepped in behind me. "Please forgive the attire," he said smoothly. "The CEO has just completed a spot inspection of the chemical mixing line, and safety protocols require full face shielding for 30 minutes post-exposure." It was a lie, but they bought it immediately. In fact, it made them respect me more. To them, this was the eccentricity of a billionaire. Hunter stepped forward, his hand extended, ignoring the fact that I had not offered mine. "Hello," he said, his voice dripping with sycophancy. "It is an honor. I am Hunter Davis, founder of NextGen. This is my board." I walked right past his outstretched hand. I did not look at him. I walked to the head of the long obsidian conference table and placed my leather portfolio down. The sound echoed in the silent room. I gestured for them to sit. I watched them scramble for chairs, eager to please the person they thought was their savior. It was fascinating to witness. They were looking directly at my hairline, my hands, my posture, But they did not recognize me. Why would they? They had never really looked at Nia the sister. They had only ever looked at Nia the servant. They saw a worker who carried boxes, not a woman who carried a company. My back was straight, my head was high, and I vibrated with an authority that was alien to them. I sat down slowly, crossed my legs, and stared at them through the dark tint of my glasses. My mother was fidgeting with her pearl necklace, clearly unnerved by my silence. Tasha was staring at my suit, probably trying to calculate how much it cost. Hunter was sweating. I let the silence stretch out for a full minute, making them squirm in their seats. I was savoring the delicious irony that the people who claimed to know me best were currently introducing themselves to me as if we were strangers. They thought they were sitting across from a checkbook, but they were actually sitting across from a mirror that was about to show them who they really were. I sat at the head of the polished obsidian table and deliberately did not speak. I simply opened the leather portfolio in front of me and began to read the documents slowly. The silence in the room grew heavy and thick. I could hear Hunter shifting in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. I could smell Tasha's perfume, which had turned sour with her anxiety. They were waiting for a greeting. They were waiting for me to fawn over them, to apologize for the delay, to acknowledge their self-perceived greatness. When I did none of those things, their confusion turned into indignation. My mother was the first to snap. She looked at my mask and my sunglasses, and her brain frantically tried to categorize me. In her worldview, power was loud. Power was a man in a suit shaking hands and making noise. Silence and anonymity were traits of the help. Therefore, she concluded, I could not possibly be the person in charge. I must be a proxy. A secretary sent to stall them. "Excuse me, Miss Joyce," said her voice cutting through the quiet like a serrated knife. She leaned forward, placing her elbows on the table in a gesture of aggression. "I think there has been a misunderstanding. We did not drive all the way out to this industrial wasteland to meet with a subordinate. We were promised a meeting with the owner, the decision maker." I stopped reading. I did not look up. I just held my hand perfectly still over the paper. Joyce took my silence as submission. She scoffed and turned to Tasha, rolling her eyes. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "They send in an assistant to vet us. Look at her, she is afraid to even speak." She turned back to me, her voice raising an octave. "Listen to me, young lady. We are the Washingtons. My son-in-law runs Next Gen Dynamics. We do not conduct business with staff. No matter how well dressed you are wasting our time. Go get your boss. Tell him we are waiting and our patience is wearing thin." Hunter, sensing an opportunity to assert his dominance, decided to pile on. He wanted to show his wife and mother-in-law that he was in control. He pushed his half-empty coffee mug across the glass table toward me. It slid with a harsh scraping sound, stopping just inches from my hand. "And while you are up," Hunter said, giving me a dismissive wave of his hand, "get me a fresh latte. Oat milk, extra foam. This one has gone cold, and quite frankly it tastes like vending machine swill. If we are going to sign a multi-million-dollar deal with this company, I expect better service than this. Chop chop." I stared at the coffee cup. Then I looked up at them. It was a moment of perfect crystallized irony. They were sitting in my building, begging for my money, and yet they were treating me like a waitress. Their arrogance was so deeply ingrained that it blinded them to the reality right in front of their faces. They were insulting the only person on earth who could save them. I slowly closed the portfolio. The sound was soft but final. I reached up with both hands. I hooked my fingers around the loops of the mask and the arm of the sunglasses. It was time to show them exactly who they were ordering around. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the floor, a harsh sound that made Tasha jump. Hunter smirked, leaning back with his hands behind his head, convinced that his command for fresh coffee was being obeyed. He thought I was getting up to serve him. He thought I was walking to the door to fetch a barista. But I did not walk to the door. I walked to the very edge of the table, looming over them, casting a long shadow that fell across their laps. I reached out and picked up the heavy file folder containing the contract they were so desperate to sign. I held it for a moment, letting them look at the Apex Group logo embossed in gold leaf. Then I dropped it. Thud. The sound was heavy and authoritative, shaking the glass surface of the table. The smirk vanished from Hunter's face. He sat up straighter, sensing a shift in the atmospheric pressure of the room. My mother frowned, opening her mouth to scold me for my insolence, but the words died in her throat. With slow, deliberate movements, I raised my hands to my face. I hooked my fingers around the arms of the oversized sunglasses. I pulled them off, folding them with a sharp click and placing them on top of the file. I stared at them with my naked eyes. I saw the flicker of recognition ignite in Tasha's gaze, a spark of confusion mixed with denial. She knew those eyes, but she could not reconcile them with the woman standing in this office. Then I reached for the mask. I unlooped the strap from my left ear, then my right. The black fabric fell away, revealing the face they had scrubbed from their family photos. I did not blink. I did not look away. I stared directly into the soul of the woman who had birthed me and then discarded me. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had just detonated, but had not yet created the sound wave. Joyce's face went slack. Her skin turned the color of old ash. Her lips moved, forming silent shapes, trying to process the impossibility of what she was seeing. Tasha let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her throat as if she were choking. Hunter looked like he had been punched in the gut, his eyes darting from my face to the name on the contract and back again. I leaned forward, resting my knuckles on the table, bringing my face inches from my mother's terrified stare. I curled my lip into a smile that contained zero warmth. It was a smile of pure cold victory. This coffee is brewed by a $5,000 Italian machine. I said, my voice low and steady, allowing every syllable to land like a physical blow. Mom, do you really find the taste so offensive? Or does it just taste like the daughter you threw away? Hello, friend, Bakta den. Bakta. I have completed Block 26, the silence. This is the pivotal moment of revelation. I focused heavily on the sensory details of the silence, making the room feel claustrophobic, and the sheer cognitive dissonance of the family. Tasha's line about cleaning is delivered with desperate denial, making Marcus's correction hit even harder. Here's the content in English optimized for AI voice reading. The silence that descended on the conference room was heavy enough to crush bones. It was not a peaceful quiet. It was a vacuum. The only sound was the low, rhythmic hum of the central air conditioning system, which seemed to roar in the stillness. It sounded like a countdown. I watched the blood drain from their faces in real time. It was as if I had pulled a plug and drained the life out of them. My mother was the first to physically crumble. Her hands, which had been gripping her designer purse with white-knuckled tension, suddenly went limp. The bag slipped from her lap and hit the floor with a heavy, dull thud. A tube of lipstick rolled out across the carpet. But she did not even blink. She did not look down. Her eyes were locked on my face, wide and terrified. She looked like she was seeing a ghost. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out, only a dry, rasping breath. Hunter looked as though he had been struck by lightning. He slumped back into the leather chair, his arrogance evaporating instantly. His mouth hung open in a slack-jawed gape. I could see his eyes darting frantically from me to the contract on the table. His brain was trying to do the math. He was realizing that the person he had just ordered to fetch coffee was the same person holding the $4 million lifeline his company needed to survive. He looked sick. His skin took on a waxy gray pallor. Tasha was the only one who tried to fight the reality. Her mind simply could not accept what her eyes were seeing. It broke her worldview. She let out a nervous, high-pitched giggle that sounded bordering on hysteria. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "Nia," she stammered, her voice wobbling. "What is this? Is this a prank? Why are you wearing that suit? Did you steal it from the locker room?" She looked around the room, searching for a camera crew. "You are the cleaning lady, right? You are just dusting the office before the real boss gets here. You almost got us." Before I could even dignify that with a response, Marcus stepped forward. He moved from the shadows of the room and stood directly beside my chair. His face was hard, his professional mask replaced by protective anger. He did not raise his voice, but his tone was sharp enough to cut glass. "Mrs. Davis," Marcus said, his voice projecting clearly across the table, "I strongly suggest you watch your tone. You are not speaking to a member of the cleaning staff. You are speaking to the founder, owner, and majority shareholder of Apex Group. You are in the presence of CEO Washington. Show some respect, or I will have security escort you out of the building immediately." The words hit Tasha like a physical slap. CEO Washington. The title hung in the air, vibrating with power. Tasha's mouth snapped shut. She looked from Marcus to me, and I saw the light of understanding finally flicker on behind her eyes. The denial died, and in its place came pure, unadulterated fear. They were trapped in a glass cage with the lion they had been poking for years, and they finally realized the gate was locked. I leaned back in my executive chair and allowed the silence to stretch until it was thin and agonizing. I crossed my legs and rested my hands lightly on the armrests, looking every inch the monarch of this kingdom. Across from me, the Washington dynasty had shrunk. They sat hunched in their chairs, their postures collapsed inward, as if they were trying to make themselves small enough to disappear. Hunter opened his mouth, his lips trembling as he tried to form a sentence. He probably wanted to apologize, or perhaps try to spin a new lie, but I did not give him the chance. I raised a single finger. It was a small gesture, but it shut his mouth instantly. I am not interested in your words, Hunter, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. I am interested in facts, and I have all the facts right here. I reached for the second file on my desk. It was not the contract. It was a background check. I flipped it open and began to read aloud, my eyes scanning the pages with clinical detachment. Next Gen Dynamics. Founded 3 years ago. Total revenue to date 0. Total operating losses $2.4 million. I looked up at him. He flinched. You came into my office acting like a titan of industry. You put your feet on my table and demanded coffee. But looking at these numbers, I do not see a CEO. I see a con artist who is drowning. Hunter tried to protest. That is just on paper, Nia. You know how startups work. We are in the burn phase. I slammed the folder shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Do not insult my intelligence, I snapped. You are not burning cash, Hunter. You are incinerating it. And the worst part is not even the debt. It is who you stole from. I turned my gaze to my mother. She was staring at her hands, her face a mask of misery. I pulled out a document from the back of the file. It was a copy of a property lien. I slid it across the glass table until it rested directly in front of her. Does this look familiar, Mom? I asked softly. She looked down and a sob escaped her throat. It was the deed to her house. You let him gamble with your home. I continued, my voice hard. You let him leverage the roof over your head for a cryptocurrency scam. I know about the second mortgage. I know about the missed payments. I know that the bank has already drafted the foreclosure notice. You are not just broke. You are 30 days away from being homeless. You came here today thinking you were going to sign a deal that would save you. You thought you could trick some dumb factory owner into funding your lifestyle. But there is no deal, Hunter. There is no partnership. There is only me. And I am the only thing standing between you and the street. I watched the realization hit them. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a naked, desperate terror. They were not looking at a daughter or a sister anymore. They were looking at their judge, jury, and executioner. And for the first time in their lives, they were waiting for me to decide their fate. The shock on my mother's face lasted exactly 10 seconds before her survival instinct kicked in. I watched the transformation happen in real time. It was terrifyingly impressive. The fear in her eyes evaporated and was instantly replaced by a look of overwhelming theatrical adoration. She smoothed down her dress, took a deep breath, and decided to rewrite history right there in the room. She stood up and rushed around the side of the huge conference table, her arms outstretched as if she were greeting a long-lost lover. Nia, she exclaimed, her voice trembling with an emotion that was entirely manufactured. Oh, my baby girl, look at you. She moved toward me with a speed I had not seen in years. I knew it. I just knew it. She turned to Tasha and Hunter, gesturing wildly at me. I told you, didn't I? I told everyone. I said Nia is the quiet genius of the family. I always said she was destined for greatness. Oh, honey, I am so incredibly proud of you. She reached out to grab my hands. She wanted to clasp them in hers, to establish a physical connection that would bridge the gap between her debt and my bank account. She wanted to hug the CEO. She did not want to hug the daughter. I did not let her make contact. I snatched my hands away as if her skin were made of burning coal. I took a sharp step back, putting 3 feet of distance between us. My expression remained frozen in a mask of absolute coldness. Do not touch me, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that echoed off the glass walls. Joyce froze her hands, hovering in the empty air. She looked hurt, a performance she had perfected over decades. Nia, honey, why are you being like this? I am your mother. I just want to congratulate you. I looked her up and down, letting my gaze linger on her expensive manicure. Have you forgotten, Mother? My hands are dirty. I work in a factory, remember? I smell like oil and sweat. I took a step toward her, forcing her to retreat. You told me at the Ivy that you didn't want to explain my profession to your friends. You dropped my gift on the floor because you didn't want to touch something a laborer had held. You said I was a stain, so do not stand there and pretend you are proud. You are not proud. You are broke, and you are terrified. Joyce tried to laugh a nervous, brittle sound. Oh, stop it, Nia, you are being dramatic. That was just tough love. We were trying to motivate you. We wanted you to strive for better. And look at this, it worked. You built all of this because we pushed you. It was not tough love, I cut her off sharply. It was cruelty. I built this empire in spite of you, not because of you. Do not insult my intelligence by pretending you ever cared about me. The only thing you care about is the money you think I'm about to give you. But I have news for you, Mom. My money is just like my hands. It is too dirty for you to touch. So sit down and keep your hands to yourself before I have security throw you out for harassment. I walked back around the desk and picked up the contract that Hunter had been drooling over. I held it up so he could see the signature line that would never be filled. This meeting is over, I said calmly. And so is Next Gen Dynamics. I am rejecting your proposal. I will not partner with a company that has zero liquidity and fraudulent leadership. The reality of my words hit Hunter like a physical blow. He saw his last lifeline being cut. He saw the eviction notices, the repossessed Porsche, and the jail time for fraud that was surely coming. The arrogant tech bro facade crumbled completely. He did not argue. He did not try to negotiate. He did something that I never thought I would see a man like him do. He dropped. Hunter fell to his knees on the expensive carpet. The sound was heavy and pathetic. He scrambled forward on his hands and knees until he was at the edge of my desk, looking up at me with wet, desperate eyes. He looked like a child who had broken a vase. Nia, please. He begged, his voice cracking. You cannot do this. You are family. If you do not sign this, I am dead. They will come for everything. He grabbed the edge of the desk, his knuckles white. It was not my fault, Nia, I swear. It was the market. The crypto crash came out of nowhere. The regulators changed the rules overnight. I was just unlucky. Every entrepreneur has a run of bad luck. I just need one break. Just one signature and I can fix it all. I can pay Mom back. I can buy Tasha a house. Please, Nia. Don't let me drown because of a little bad timing. I looked down at him. I felt no pity. I felt only a profound sense of disgust. Seeing him on his knees did not make me feel powerful. It just confirmed how weak he truly was. He was a man who took no responsibility for the wreckage he created. I leaned over the desk, invading his personal space, forcing him to look directly into my eyes. Stop talking, I commanded, and stop lying to yourself. You are not a victim of the market, Hunter. You are not a victim of bad timing or bad luck. You started with more advantages than 90% of the population. You had capital, you had connections, you had a safety net provided by my mother. I pointed a finger at his chest. You burned it all because you are lazy and you are greedy. You thought you were too smart to do the actual work. You wanted the lifestyle of a CEO without the labor. That is not bad luck, Hunter. That is incompetence. You are simply bad at business, and I do not invest in incompetence. I tossed the contract into the shredder beside my desk. The machine roared to life, eating the paper, and with it, Hunter's last hope. The sound of the blades tearing the paper was the only answer he was going to get. The mechanical whine of the shredder faded into silence, leaving only the sound of Hunter's ragged breathing. He stared at the machine as if it had just eaten his soul. I sat back down and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I pulled out a single crisp document stapled at the corner. I had prepared this days ago, knowing exactly how this meeting would end. I knew they would come to me on their knees, and I knew exactly what their desperation was worth. Get up, Hunter, I said, my voice cutting through his self-pity. Stop embarrassing yourself on my carpet. I am not going to let you go to jail. And I am not going to let my mother sleep on the street. But I am not going to partner with you either. Partnerships are for equals, and we are not equals. I slid the document across the desk. I am willing to acquire Next Gen Dynamics. I will assume all outstanding liabilities, including the $2 million debt and the lien on my mother's estate. I will inject enough capital to fulfill the Sterling Global contract. Hunter scrambled up from the floor, snatching the paper like a starving dog. Thank you, Nia, he blubbered, wiping his nose. Oh, thank God. I knew you would come through. We can turn this around together. Read line 4, I commanded, pointing at the bold text. Hunter's eyes scanned the page. His relief vanished instantly, replacing it with horror. 60%, he choked out. You want 60% equity. That gives you controlling interest. That makes it your company. It is already my company, Hunter, I replied coolly. I am just the only one willing to pay for the wreckage. You have run it into the ground. You have no leverage. If you do not sign that paper by the time you leave this room, the deal is off. And that is not all. I leaned forward, interlocking my fingers. You are no longer the CEO. You are demoted effective immediately. You will retain the title of head of sales, but you will have no signing authority. You will not access the bank accounts. You will not make strategic decisions. You will report directly to Marcus, my executive assistant. You will clock in at 9, and you will clock out at 5. If you are late once, if you miss a single target, I will fire you for cause and you will lose your remaining equity. You can't do that, he whispered, his face pale. I am the founder. I built that brand. I cannot work for your assistant. You built a scam, I shot back. I am buying the logo and the client list. The rest is garbage. You wanted to be a businessman. Hunter, well, now is your chance. But you are going to do it my way. You are going to earn your paycheck. Take the pen, Hunter, or take the handcuffs when the federal investigators show up next week. It is your choice, but do not make me wait. My time costs money. Hunter slumped into his chair, clutching the pen like a lifeline, defeated and broken. I did not waste another second on him. I swiveled my chair to face the woman who had taught me that love was conditional on status. Joyce was clutching her chest, looking between me and Hunter, trying to calculate if she had survived the storm. She offered me a tentative, trembling smile, assuming that since I had saved the company, I had saved her lifestyle too. She was wrong. Now let us discuss your living arrangements, Mother, I said, my voice flat. I have wired the funds to the bank. The foreclosure is halted. The lien is lifted. Joyce let out a loud, melodramatic sigh of relief. She actually reached for her purse as if to leave. Oh, thank God. I knew you wouldn't let them take the family home. You are a good girl, Nia. I will make sure to invite you over for— Sit down, I barked. I did not say I gave you the house. I said I paid off the debt. That means the bank no longer owns the deed. I do. Joyce froze halfway out of her chair. I do not understand, she stammered. It is very simple, I explained, leaning forward. You are no longer the homeowner. You are a tenant, and I am your landlord. You are welcome to continue living in the estate. I will not evict you. However, you will pay rent. Market value for a property of that size is $6,000 a month. Payment is due on the 1st. Rent. Joyce shrieked, her face turning a blotchy red. I do not have $6,000 a month. You know I have no income. How do you expect me to pay you? I anticipated that problem, I said. And I have a solution. I reached under my desk again. This time I did not pull out a document. I pulled out a bundle of heavy, stiff fabric. It was a bright orange, high-visibility vest and a dark blue uniform shirt. The Apex Group logo was stitched on the pocket. I tossed it onto the glass table. It landed with a soft whump right in front of her manicured hands. We are hiring, I said coldly. We have an opening in quality control on line 4. It is an entry-level position. You will be inspecting packaging for defects. Joyce stared at the uniform as if it were a bag of venomous snakes. You cannot be serious. You want me to work on the floor. Like a peasant. It pays $20 an hour. I continued, ignoring her outrage. If you pick up overtime, you can just barely afford the rent. But there are rules, Mother. Line 4 is a standing line. That means you are on your feet for 8 hours a day. No stools, no sitting, no breaks except for lunch. You will wear steel-toed boots. You will tie your hair back. And if you are late, you get written up. I am 60 years old, she screamed, tears of rage finally spilling over. I have bad knees. I cannot stand for 8 hours. This is humiliation. No, I said, standing up and towering over her. This is labor. This is the dirty work you were too ashamed to explain to your friends. You spent your whole life looking down on people who work with their hands. Well, now you are going to be one of them. Put on the shirt, Mother. Your shift starts in 10 minutes. And do not worry about explaining it to your friends. I am sure they will recognize the logo. The orange safety vest sat on the table between us like a radioactive object. My mother stared at it, and her face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Shock, disbelief, and then finally pure, unadulterated rage. She stood up so abruptly that her chair tipped over backward and crashed onto the floor. She pointed a shaking finger at me, her eyes bulging with indignation. "You are out of your mind!" she screamed. Her voice cracked, losing all of its polished society composure. "I am your mother. I gave you life. I raised you in one of the finest homes in Atlanta. I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me. By trying to humiliate me. By trying to turn me into a slave in your factory. I am an old woman, Nia. My body cannot handle physical labor. I have arthritis. I have delicate health. You are trying to kill me." She looked to Hunter and Tasha for support, but they were looking at their shoes, afraid to draw my fire. Joyce turned back to me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "This is abuse," she sobbed. "You are abusing your own mother. I will not do it. I refuse. I am Joyce Washington. I do not pack boxes." I remained seated, my expression unmoving. I waited for her tantrum to run out of oxygen. When she finally paused to take a ragged breath, I spoke. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of a gavel. "You are not old, Mother," I said coolly. "You are 60. You play tennis at the country club every Tuesday morning for 3 hours. You dance in high heels at charity galas until midnight. You have plenty of energy when it involves spending money or showing off. You only become frail when asked to contribute. That is not age. That is laziness." I stood up and walked around the table, closing the distance between us. She flinched, but I did not stop until I was standing right in front of her. "Do you remember what you told me when I asked for a loan to start this business?" I asked. "You told me that handouts create weakness. You told me that labor is glory, and that I should be grateful for the opportunity to work my way up from the bottom. You said hard work builds character. Were you lying to me then, or are you lying to yourself now?" Joyce opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "There is no debate here. The days of you living as a parasite are over. You have a very simple choice to make right now. You can pick up that vest, put it on, and report to line 4 to start earning your keep. Or you can walk out those double doors." I pointed to the exit. "If you walk out that door, you are homeless. I will have the locks changed on the estate within the hour. You have no credit. You have no cash. And thanks to Hunter, you have no assets. You can go sleep in a shelter. You can go beg your rich friends for a couch to sleep on and explain to them why you are destitute. Or you can work." I looked at my watch. "You have 30 seconds to decide. The shift bell rings at 1 o'clock. If you are not on the line, the offer is rescinded and I put your belongings on the curb. What is it going to be, Mother? Pride or a roof over your head? Choose." The room felt like a courtroom where the sentence was about to be passed. My mother stared at the heavy oak door that led to the hallway. I could see the calculations running frantically behind her eyes. She was thinking about her friends at the country club. She was thinking about the cold reality of a shelter cot versus the warm thread count of her sheets at home. She looked at her manicured hands and then at the bright orange vest. Her vanity was fighting a losing battle against her self-preservation. Slowly, and with a movement that seemed physically painful, she reached out. Her hand shook so violently that her bracelets rattled together like chains. She picked up the cheap plastic pen I had provided. She did not look at me. She looked down at the employment contract, the paper that defined her new reality as a subordinate. She pressed the pen to the paper. The scratching sound was loud in the quiet room. It sounded like a surrender. She signed her name, Joyce Washington, not with a flourish, but with a jagged, defeated line. She pushed the paper away and buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. Hunter was next. He did not hesitate. The fight had left him completely. He pulled the stock transfer agreement toward him and signed away 60% of his company in less than 3 seconds. He signed away his autonomy, his title, and his future. Tasha followed suit, her tears dripping onto the legal document, smudging the ink. She signed the guarantee that bound her to the debt. In the span of 2 minutes, the Washington dynasty had dismantled itself and handed the pieces to me. I stood up. The motion was sharp and final. I reached across the table and gathered the documents, stacking them neatly into a pile. I tapped the edges on the table to straighten them and placed them securely inside my portfolio. The sound of the portfolio snapping shut echoed like a gunshot. I picked up the orange vest and the blue shirt. I walked around the table and placed them on my mother's lap. She flinched as if I had dropped a live grenade on her. "Welcome to Apex Group," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "We are a results-oriented company. We value punctuality and efficiency." I looked at Hunter and Tasha. "You two report to Marcus in HR immediately for your onboarding. He will assign you your cubicles and your login credentials. Do not expect corner offices. You will be in the open plan bullpen with the junior sales team." I turned back to my mother. "As for you, Mother, go home and get some sleep. You are going to need it. The first shift bell rings at 6 in the morning. That means you need to be punched in and at your station by 5:55. If you are 1 minute late, the gate locks and you are docked a half day of pay. Do not test me on this." I walked to the door and held it open for them. They stood up slowly, moving like people who were walking to the gallows. They shuffled past me, heads, bowed eyes on the floor. They were broken. They were humbled. And for the first time in their lives, they were mine. "See you in the morning," I said, as they stepped into the hallway. "Don't be late." The factory floor of Apex Group was a world of rhythmic noise and relentless motion. It had been 30 days since the signing in the boardroom, and the transformation of Joyce Washington was absolute. Gone were the silk blouses and the tailored trousers. Gone was the intricate blowout hairstyle that cost $200 a week to maintain. Standing at Station 4 on the packaging line was a woman who looked like a shadow of her former self. She was wearing the standard-issue dark blue industrial uniform. It was 2 sizes too big, hanging off her frame like a sack. Her hair was pulled back into a severe practical bun, held in place by a cheap plastic clip. Without the layers of makeup and the distraction of jewelry, the lines of age and exhaustion on her face were starkly visible. The conveyor belt moved at a speed that allowed for zero hesitation. Joyce's job was to inspect the seals on the eco-friendly packaging units. Pick up, inspect, bin, pick up, inspect, bin. It was a cycle that repeated thousands of times a shift. Her hands, which had never held anything heavier than a champagne glass, were now dry and trembling. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, trying to find relief. Her feet were swollen inside the heavy steel-toed boots. The concrete floor was unforgiving. Every bone in her lower body ached with a dull, throbbing pain that never went away. She was learning the hard physical lesson that her daughter had learned years ago. The concrete does not care who you are. She missed a beat. Her eyes blurred for a second from fatigue, and a defective package slid past her station. It traveled down the line, triggering a red light and a loud buzzer further down the belt. The line ground to a sudden halt. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the noise. "Hey, Washington!" The shout came from the walkway above. It was the shift foreman, a burly man named Martinez, who had zero patience for incompetence. He stomped down the metal stairs and marched right up to her station. He did not care that she used to be a socialite. To him, she was just a bottleneck in his production quota. "You are sleeping on your feet again," he barked, leaning into her personal space. "That is the 3rd unit you missed this hour. Do you think we pay you to daydream? You are holding up the entire line. Look at the board. We are down 2% on efficiency because of you. The old Joyce would have gasped. She would have demanded to speak to a manager. She would have threatened to have him fired for his tone, but that Joyce was dead. The woman standing on the line simply shrank into her collar. She kept her eyes on her boots, terrified to make eye contact. She knew that one more strike meant termination, and termination meant the shelter. "I am sorry, Mr. Martinez," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It won't happen again, I promise. It better not happen again, or you can punch out for good," Martinez snapped. "Get it moving." He hit the restart button. The buzzer sounded, and the belt roared back to life. Joyce immediately reached for the next package, her fingers moving with a desperate, frantic energy. She did not look up. She did not complain. She just worked, letting the machine dictate her life, completely crushed by the reality she had once mocked. The studio apartment was located above a 24-hour laundromat in a neighborhood Tasha used to make fun of. The air inside was thick with the smell of detergent and stale takeout. There were no walk-in closets here. There were no vanity mirrors with professional lighting. There was only a stained beige carpet and a mattress on the floor that she had bought secondhand. The silence in the room was deafening because for the first time in years, Tasha was completely alone. Hunter was gone. The power couple image they had carefully curated on Instagram had disintegrated the moment the money ran out. When the luxury lease was repossessed and the bank accounts were locked down by Nia's accountants, the love turned into venom. They screamed at each other until their throats were raw, blaming one another for the downfall. Hunter had packed a duffel bag 2 weeks ago and left to crash on a friend's couch, leaving Tasha to face the squalor alone. She realized then that she had never actually been married to a man. She had been married to a lifestyle, and without it they were strangers. Tasha sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a chaotic pile of clothes. She was not packing for a vacation. She was frantically taking photos of her old wardrobe to sell online. She was haggling with strangers on the internet over the price of a used Gucci belt. A woman in Ohio was offering her $50 for a scarf that had cost $400. Tasha typed a reply, her fingers trembling. Deal. She needed the cash for groceries. She needed the cash to keep the lights on. The humiliation burned in her chest like heartburn. She was a Washington. She was supposed to be royalty. Now she was a digital peddler selling off the scraps of her former life just to survive. She pushed a pile of clothes aside, and her hand brushed against a magazine she had bought earlier that day. It was an impulse buy, a small luxury she could not afford, but she had needed to see something beautiful. It was the latest issue of Forbes. She stared at the cover and felt her breath hitch in her throat. Staring back at her from the glossy front page was Nia. Her sister looked magnificent. She was wearing a white suit that glowed against the dark background. Her arms were crossed, her chin was lifted, and her eyes held a power that Tasha had never seen before. The headline was bold and impossible to ignore. The Silent Titan. How Nia Washington Built an Empire from the Shadows. Tasha traced the letters with her finger. She looked around her dingy apartment at the peeling paint and the pile of used clothes. Then she looked back at the magazine. The contrast shattered her. She remembered all the times she had mocked Nia. She remembered calling her dirty. She remembered laughing at her for working in the factory. She had spent her whole life thinking she was the swan and Nia was the ugly duckling. But she had been wrong. She had been so incredibly wrong. Nia was the queen, and Tasha was just a peasant in a costume. The tears came suddenly hot and stinging. She curled into a ball on the mattress, hugging the magazine to her chest. She cried for the husband she had lost. She cried for the house she would never live in again. But mostly she cried because she realized she had spent her life betting on the wrong things. She had chased the appearance of wealth while her sister was chasing the reality of it. And now, looking at Nia's face on the cover, Tasha knew that no amount of sold clothes would ever buy back the dignity she had thrown away. The timeline dissolves, fading from the image of Tasha's tear-stained face back to the present day. I am standing on the balcony of my penthouse, 50 stories above the streets of Atlanta. The wind here is different. It does not smell of exhaust or machinery. It smells of crisp night air and absolute silence. Below me, the city is a sprawling grid of golden lights, looking remarkably like the circuit boards that run my factories. It is a complex living system, and for the first time in the history of my family, I am the one controlling the switch. I swirl the dark red wine in my crystal glass, watching the liquid catch the reflection of the moon. I know what people say about me. The whispers in the industry, the rumors in the society pages. They call me ruthless. They say I am the ice queen who enslaved her own family. They look at my mother punching a time clock and my brother-in-law sitting in a cubicle, and they think I am a monster who exacted a cruel biblical revenge. But they are wrong. If I wanted revenge, I would have left them alone. I would have let the bank take the house. I would have let the federal agents take Hunter. I would have let Tasha starve in that studio apartment. Abandonment would have been the easy choice. It would have been the passive choice. But I have never been passive. I am an engineer at heart. When I see a broken machine, I do not throw it away. I strip it down to its parts, I grind away the rust, and I rebuild it until it functions. My family was a broken machine. They were rusted shut with entitlement and lubricated with delusion. They believed that the world owed them a living simply because they existed. They believed that money was magic appearing from thin air to grant their wishes. They did not understand the fundamental law of physics and finance, that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. Money is just stored energy. It is stored labor. I did not punish them. I gave them the greatest gift anyone could offer. I gave them reality. I raise my free hand, holding it up against the backdrop of the skyline. I turn it over, studying the palm. These hands are manicured now. The skin is soft, scented with lavender lotion. The nails are painted a deep, flawless burgundy. But I remember what lies beneath. I remember the grease that used to settle into the lifelines so deep that no amount of scrubbing could remove it. I remember the calluses that felt like leather. I remember the vibrations of the conveyor belt traveling up my arms until my bones hummed. These hands built an empire. They know the weight of a wrench. They know the heat of a motor. They understand that the skyscraper stands tall only because the foundation is buried in the dirt. Now my family understands it too. Tonight, my mother is soaking her feet in Epsom salts, exhausted from an 8-hour shift. Her back aches, her legs throb. But when she pays me her rent on the first of the month, she does it with money she earned. It is a small amount, but it is real. For the first time in 60 years, she is not a parasite. She is a participant. Hunter is tired, his ego bruised and battered by the daily grind of reporting to a boss he used to look down on. But he is sleeping soundly because he is no longer lying to investors. Tasha is learning the value of $1 because she has to trade minutes of her life to get it. I did not break them. I woke them up. I stripped away the illusion of their superiority and forced them to live in the world they used to mock. I taught them that dignity is not found in a designer label or a country club membership. Dignity is found in the ability to stand on your own 2 feet and say, "I made this." I look down at the city one last time. The Apex Group logo glows neon blue in the distance, a beacon over the industrial district. It is my mark on the world. I lower my hand and bring the wine glass to my lips. The vintage is exquisite, tasting of dark fruit and victory. They used to say I was the help. They used to say I was invisible. Now every time they punch that clock, every time they cash that check, they see me. I am not just their boss. I am their lesson. And class is in session forever. I take a slow, deliberate sip. The city lights seem to blur as the screen begins to fade to black, leaving only the sound of the wind and the final unspoken truth. I won. The saga of the Washington family teaches us a brutal but necessary truth. True power is built on the bedrock of labor, not the shifting sands of status. While arrogance and entitlement may shine brightly for a moment, they eventually collapse under the weight of reality. Nia proves that dirty hands are not a mark of shame, but a badge of honor. We learn that dignity cannot be bought with debt. It must be earned through grit, competence, and the quiet discipline of building something real. In the end, the only currency that matters is what you can create. Drop A in the comments if you are building your own empire today and subscribe for more stories of justice,